Hey guys, it's FLW Tour Pro Andrew Upshaw. I'm going to talk to you a little bit about fishing in the fall. You know, one of my favorite things to do in the fall is throw a lipless crankbait around bait fish, especially in the backs of pockets. You know, right here I have two different lipless crankbaits. I've got a 1/2 ounce original rattle trap and I've got a 1/4 ounce original rattle trap. You know, these both have their place in my boat, especially in the fall. Number one color in the fall, chrome black back, especially on sunny days. If the days are a little cloudier, that's when I go to like a sexy west, is like a sexy shad type color. Those are your best ones. But when it's a sunshiny day like it is today, go chrome and black. You can't beat it. Okay, so if I'm talking about a 1/2 ounce original rattle trap, I'm throwing our 7/6 Lew's mag trap rod. You know, this is a really good rod. It has a lot of tip, but it's more parabolic, so whenever you do hook that big fish on the trap, you can land him. The reel that I use is a BB1 Pro. It's a 7-to-1 gear ratio. The reason I like a 7-to-1 is so I can take up a lot of line fast, especially on a long cast. You know, today we have a lot of bait and fish that are feeding on the bait, and you know, they never really school right next to the boat, unfortunately, so you gotta make those long casts reach them. You know, and the thing is, when you make that long cast reach those fish, they're gonna normally hit it on the very end of your cast. You need a really fast reel to catch up the line and be able to drive that hook home. And you know, that's what's really important with throwing a rattle trap is being able to drive that hook home. We have really good hooks on these rattle traps. These are Mustad triple grips. You don't have to change hooks anymore. They come with great hooks, you know, and that's what it's all about, is having a really good product that you can take right out of a package. I actually took this one out of the package today and I've already caught fish on it. I'm telling you, there's just nothing that beats it. Now that's the 1/2 ounce original rattle trap. I fish this when the bait's a little bit bigger. You know, if I see big gizzards rolling around or even bigger threadfin, that's what I go to. I like a 1/4 ounce rattle trap, especially in highly pressured places where a lot of people have gone through or the pressure's changed, like a cold front's rolled in. But I fish it a little bit different. You know, I fish it on different tackle, and there's a reason behind it. You know, the 1/4 ounce trap, like I said, it comes with Mustad triple grip, so you don't ever have to change hooks. But I fish it on 30-pound braid. I think this is extremely important because I can snatch it out of that grass. Normally I'm throwing it in like 1 to 1.5, maybe 2 foot of water. I'm throwing it dirt shallow. So I want to be able to rip it up out of that stuff, maybe whatever the bottom composition is. It doesn't matter if it's leaves or a little slime or grass. I want to keep it above that, and the braid allows me to do that and allows me to snatch it up out of that grass really well. But I throw it on a different rod. We actually have a 6'9" rattle trap rod. It's a really limber parabolic rod. For throwing braid, there's not a better rod out there than throwing that rattle trap rod because it allows the fish to load up onto it, and that's what it's all. That's what I really like about it, is it loads up with that braid, and you can always land those fish. The reel I use on this one in particular is the Team Lew's Light. And once again, I throw it in a 7-to-1 gear ratio, and I really believe in a 7-to-1 gear ratio when throwing lipless baits. The only time I will not throw a 7-to-1 is when I'm deep reeling a trap in the pre-spawn in deep grass beds. Then I'll go to sometimes a 5-to-1, sometimes a 6-5-to-1. It just depends on the depth that I'm fishing. But when I'm fishing super shallow like I am today in the backs of these pockets, I'm going 7-to-1 all day. And you know, this Team Lew's Light, it's kind of a happy medium between an original and Lew's reel and a BB1. So you still get that distance, but I use this for a lot more accuracy. So if I'm throwing around grass beds or throwing around logs or laydowns, whatever it may be, this is the reel that I use because I can be a lot more accurate with it, but I still have the distance for it. So these are the setups that I use for when I'm fishing the 1/2 ounce and 1/4 ounce original rattle trap. When I'm fishing for bass in the fall, you know, I really like to go to the backs of these pockets, and I'm not really looking for any piece of cover in particular. I'm really looking for the bait. I mean, number one, if the bait is in the back of the pockets, the bass are not far behind. If not, they're already back there as well. It doesn't really matter what type of cover though. I mean, you could be fishing around grass, rock, it could be these stake piles, it could be any of these things. I mean, the fish are gonna be related to the bait regardless. I mean, they can be out in the middle of this flat in a do-nothing mud flat. I mean, that's how these fish really set up back here. And you know, the number one bait to target these fish is a rattle trap. And like we talked about earlier, you know, we talked about the setups and exactly how I set them up and what I throw on them. But at the end of the day, you just gotta match the hatch. You gotta really look at the shad, what they look like, and match them. And the number one matched color that we have at Bill Lewis Lures is chrome black. And You know, the retrieve always varies. It depends on the time of the year, depends on how the bass are chasing, and honestly, it depends on the cover you're fishing around. The basic retrieve on a rattle trap is you cast it out there and you reel it in. Now, to me, it's much more complex than that. I really like to figure out, are the bass feeding more towards the top, more towards the bottom, or more towards in between? And once you can figure out if the fish are feeding in those different areas, that's how you really understand your retrieve. So let's say, for instance, today the fish are chasing bait. You know, they're more towards the top of the water column, and honestly, we're only in about 1.5 feet of water, so you're not necessarily wanting to fish it on the bottom. So in this case, I'm going to cast out my rattle trap. In this case, I'm throwing a 1/4 ounce trap, and I'm going to keep it a pretty good steady retrieve. You know, I'm not burning it back to the boat, but I'm keeping it, you know, steady, reel and retrieve. But every once in a while I'll pop the rod, and what that does is it disengages those BBs a little bit more in a different direction, and honestly, it just triggers the fish every once in a while. So if every once in a while, just shake your rod a little bit while you're reeling it. You don't do it the whole time. You're not sitting there doing this while you're reeling it. Just every once in a while, pop your rod while you're reeling the bait, and you're gonna have more strikes that way, and you're starting to figure out, man, every time I pop my rod, I get a bite, and there's a reason. It's what it does is it, when it knocks those BBs, those fish react to it and they eat it. Now, in certain other situations, like if we're fishing in the spring, early spring, sometimes those fish are sitting down towards the bottom or even in that middle water column. There's a basic retrieve. There's two basic retrieves actually that I fish. Number one, it's a slow, steady retrieve, just like this, super slow, and every once in a while just pop it or snatch it out of that grass. Honestly, the best terminology for this is called crawling a trap. So what you're doing is just crawling it over that grass bed. And the way a rattle trap's designed is when you're reeling that trap, it actually will just fold right, or just kind of lay over that grass and never hang up. So you can crawl it as slow as you want to crawl it, and it'll stay out of that grass. But every once in a while it'll catch, and that's when you're snatching up out of there. That's one retrieve. Second retrieve that I do is called yo-yoing. A lot of people know about it. I mean, it's not a big secret anymore. It used to be. I remember when it was a secret and you go out there and catch 20 pounds on it like that. But the idea behind yo-yoing was you cast it out there and you raise your rod up and you let the trap fall. You raise your rod up and you let the trap fall. And what that does is it takes that trap, and instead of hitting grass and snatching it, you're creating that without ever having to actually hit the grass. So you're snatching up out of the grass every single time you move your rod up. So it causes more of a reaction strike, but it takes more work. And to me, you don't necessarily catch all those giants. When I'm catching giants on a rattle trap is when I'm slowly crawling it over the grass that time of year. Now back to the fall. When I'm fishing a trap in the fall, I want it to be faster. I'm not necessarily fishing to fish slow or methodical stuff. I'm actually fishing to cover water and to chase bait. You know, like right there, a couple bass came up and ate some shad, so I'm gonna reel this thing pretty fast. I mean, as you can tell, they're blowing up like crazy over there, and hopefully I can catch one of them. But you know, having a reel that can cast that far is so crucial. I mean, watch this, man. This is what makes a lose great, is being able to launch a 1/4 ounce rattle trap that far and reach those schooling fish. And you know, that's why you gotta have a fast gear ratio reel, a 7-to-1, so you can burn it back in and make another cast and get back in the strike zone faster. And that's how you catch more fish on a rattle trap. There's one. You know, that's what I did. I kept, you know, we sat there and we watched these fish just continually blowing up bait. Now granted, this isn't a giant bass, but you know, we kept making casts where those bait were and where these bass were blowing up. And that's what's important when you're throwing a trap. You know this fish wanted this trap. When he eats it sideways like that, you're throwing the exact right color, you're throwing the exact right size. We're gonna continue to catch more bass just like this on a rattle trap.